Welcome to our Meet the Buyer sessions. I'm Heather, the founder of Sourcing Playground, and I'm here today with Susannah Davda from The Shoe Consultant, and we're going to be talking about how to start a shoe brand and what are the things you need to know and how to go about doing it. So thanks so much for joining us today, Susannah.
Thank you so much for inviting me. It's great to be talking to you.
So basically, we're going to be talking about how to start a shoe brand and all the different things you need to know, especially if you're a first-time brand. So could you tell us a little bit about your experience and how you got into the industry?
Yes, absolutely. To be honest, footwear is all I've ever really done. From working in shoe shops as a teenager to realizing that this is where I wanted my career to go. So I studied for a degree in footwear design. When I graduated, I joined a large retailer, a footwear multiple in the UK, as designer and trainee buyer. So I got to see both sides.
That's exciting as a trainer.
Yeah, exactly. It was really insightful. I got to travel a lot. I got to do the big trade shows and also to see some factories, which was really useful. I did some of the technical side of the drawings and more of the statistical analysis and the things that a buyer really needs to know, as well as, I suppose, getting an instinct for what's commercial and what is just really, really appealing and exciting in terms of footwear.
Yeah.
And then I started working for a global footwear brand, managing their women's range, their women's global range, which was really interesting because
That's another skill, isn't it?
Yeah, the tastes for footwear around the world are quite different.
Yeah, massively.
Mm-hmm. So that was my background. So I've been working in the footwear industry for over 20 years, 3.5 of which have been running my own consultancy called The Shoe Consultant.
Mm-hmm. And tell us a little bit about what you guys do, The Shoe Consultant, and how you help buyers and brands and what the type of things you offer for them.
So we have two sides of the business. One side is helping people to start shoe brands. I work with startups at any stage. The preference is always to start working with them as soon as they're even thinking about starting a shoe brand.
Guide them properly.
Yeah, because there are so many mistakes that you can make in terms of being a startup. You can spend money in so many different ways. And when they work with me from the outset, then I can just drive them across the clear path where they know that they're making the right decisions all the time, and it helps their confidence, but it also just helps their business to grow more quickly or develop more quickly. So love working with startups, and that support side of things really makes me happy when they're happy.
Yeah, definitely. And in a startup, obviously, the experience and advice you give them is so valuable, and it's such a small scale, so you can really see the value that you're bringing to them.
Exactly, yes. And working one-to-one is really beneficial, I think, for both sides. Mm-hmm. And with startups, they move so quickly, so you really do see the results of the input that you've contributed really quite quickly, so that's great. And then I also work with established shoe brands and shoe businesses, so that includes retailers as well. Mm-hmm. And when they come to me, they're looking for often a different point of view. I have this, 20 years of experience that I can contribute. I have quite a holistic view. I try to be aware of any footwear developments in terms of technology, in terms of how politics is affecting footwear, new brands that could be their potential competitors. So I can give them a different viewpoint. I can give them research and research techniques that they wouldn't necessarily have thought of, because I do find that more established brands, they have particular... Sorry, they play it safe.
Yeah.
Yeah, or they have particular ways of doing things that they've been doing for quite a number of years. Whereas my thinking is, as a consultant,
Yeah.
I have to be innovative. I have to keep up to date with what's changing.
Yeah.
And the brands and the retailers who are thriving at the moment are the ones who really are keeping their ear to the ground and
definitely.
and concentrating on what consumers want.
Yeah, definitely. And we've seen that with the rise of online and the decline in retail. So it's the ones that are being the most innovative are winning, basically.
Exactly. Yeah, you're right.
Fantastic. So let's start from the beginning. So let's say you're a first-time buyer, or if you are someone that's looking to start a new brand and they are right at the very beginning. What would you say is the process, and how would they go about it? What is the things that they need to be focused on?
So the first thing always is looking at the consumer.
Mm-hmm.
And okay, so we could say that the consumer doesn't necessarily know what they want until they see it. So
Yes,
you can't.
so true.
You have to be quite clever, I think, in terms of the consumer research that you do, and that's something I can help with in terms of asking the questions that are going to get you the useful information.
Yes.
So always starting with the consumer, but also knowing the context in which you're going to be operating. So if you want to start a high-heeled shoe brand, or you're a retailer who wants to get into footwear, so perhaps there's a new buyer who is going to be focusing on the footwear, then you would want to see who else is making footwear at that market level. High heels, what are they offering to their consumers? I always recommend looking at consumer reviews.
Yeah,
because they
online, even things online, for example,
they can be really insightful, I think.
Yeah.
And you can see a company's products online, but you don't really know if they're suiting the customer, if they're selling any of them, unless you look at reviews. Or another trick I always say is to look at what's in the sale.
Yes,
because
that's so true. What hasn't sold? Yeah.
Well, this is it. And okay, so maybe it's particular sizes, which also can be quite useful to know. Or maybe it's, why are there so many sizes of this product? It just didn't work. And you try and figure out how. But so understanding the context. So the consumer, the competitor, in the country or in the areas that you are looking to operate in. And so with startups, often they come to me and they have designs in their head, and that's sort of their starting point. Whereas I tend to be the voice of reason and say, hold on, can we backtrack? Because is there an opportunity for this? Who's going to buy it?
Yeah.
Who else is making similar products? How much are they selling them for? What's their distribution model? Are they online only? Are they wholesaling? Have they got their own stores? You have to understand who you're up against.
So basically it's understanding first your consumer and what they want, and then you basically you tailor make the product around then your consumer, as opposed to, I have a great idea, let's try and fit this into a customer and try and make it match for them. So start first with the customer.
Absolutely, because the thing is, if you jump ahead and you end up making a 4-inch heel, and you've spent a load of money on heel molds because it's this really interesting heel design that you've created, and then you realize that actually your customer only wears a maximum of 3 inches, then you've wasted a load of money. So you have to do it, I think, the methodical way. And so together we would look at pricing strategy. We would also look at product strategy. So what are the consistent things that you're going to have in your product, or what can a customer always expect from your product? And that can be branding and logos, but it can also be Would they always expect them to be leather?
Yeah.
Are there particular colors that your brand is going to be all about? And then that kind of feeds into the branding elements as well.
So then from there, then would you fit the brand around the customer, or would you already have a brand in mind? And how would the brand then fit with the shoe? How would you explain that process?
So often I think the branding side of it links quite closely to the purpose of the brand. Like, what is driving this brand? What's the reason why it exists?
Yeah.
And linking that to the consumer, what they already like. So not necessarily the shoe brands that they are into already, but think about your ideal consumer and, you know, what Instagram accounts do they follow, all of those sorts of things. You know, what's their aesthetic and how does that link with your brand and your goals and your personal kind of thoughts and taste around
when
that.
you're researching this, do you have a specific method, like literally how you put this down? Is this you sort of gather lots of online resources, put it all in a Word doc and a PDF? Like how do you go through that process?
So I don't have at the moment, I have specific templates for particular areas in terms of competitor analysis, and I will always send them out to my clients. But and I do produce reports for particular clients, and I have templates that I use, but everything I do really is bespoke. When I'm helping startups, sometimes the startups are so creative that
they've done it all for you.
Well, this is it. It's sort of I tell them what they need to put in, what they need to research, and sometimes they come up with these amazing design document, you know, like in InDesign.
Oh wow, okay.
And I'm like, okay, this is cool. You know, this shows that you've got this amazing aesthetic eye, and also that you know the business side of things. So it comes across really nicely. So it's a bit of a mix. If they need templates and things from me, then I'll provide them. And often it's kind of building it in Excel and putting it into PowerPoint and then saving it as PDF, and PDF seems to be kind of a universal business plan kind of format at the moment.
And then once you've done the research, then you would go on to, I would guess, the branding and then the design. So how would you walk us through the design process? So you would obviously get a designer to do this. Where would you recommend someone going to find a shoe designer or someone to help with the technical drawings of creating the shoe?
Yeah, so I've got a network of shoe designers who I recommend. They all have different areas of expertise. They've all got years and years of experience and are also just really nice people to work with. And so if they're working with me, then I will easily give them a list of a few designers who I think would be really good for them. Also, there are courses, you know, if somebody wants to learn how to do it themselves, there are some really good courses, particularly at LCF, London College of Fashion. They do some really great short courses if you want to kind of learn those sorts of things yourself.
Yeah, exactly. You know, some people are really sort of invested in their brand and they want to get really involved into the learning and the design process. So yeah, that's great if they can have that, the course for that.
And actually, I'd recommend that even if they are working with a designer as well, because it just helps with your thought processes when you're designing something. That you have to be designing something that can be made. It's quite easy to draw a shoe. There is an impossible shoe.
It's a little squiggle, that will do, and it does not even it's constructed.
And us boring shoe people are kind of saying, okay, but where are the seams? So it's all useful. The more knowledge, the better, I would say.
And I guess as well is the terminology is really good, because we'll go later on into the process of when we start working with suppliers, but the more you know at the beginning, and that's what we always say to our buyers and our users, is you need to have product research. How can you go and brief suppliers if you don't know yourself how things are made? Because then when things go wrong, then you're able to best advise on things, and if you have a better understanding of your product, and it wins all round basically.
Absolutely, yes, completely agree. Yeah, it can be a hard learning process otherwise.
Yeah, massively. And when you start learning about a product, they're quite technical terms, like regardless of what any product you're dealing with, and it's shoes especially, because it's quite construction and there's lots of different elements on shoes. But yeah, as much as possible, research product.
Yes.
Okay, so after you've done that, so you've got your design, you've researched your branding, and you've got your idea of the shoe and your customer profiling. You go into the design. Then what is the next stage after you've got your shoe design? Where would you go next?
So I think at this point, or potentially slightly earlier, you would want to be starting to think about investors, if that's something that you need. Okay, some people will have personal savings, or they will already know people who want to invest in them, but many people will need some outside investment. So yeah, this is a good time to be talking to investors and trying to get them on board. And then it's the sourcing element. So finding a manufacturer who you want to work with and who fits with your brand values, and also with your product type, because there are many shoe manufacturers in different countries, and they all have different specialties. And also within that, there are companies who are willing to work with smaller companies, or companies who are just developing a new range and don't want to risk
investment, upfront,
a massive quantity.
So would you say, as a small to medium sized brand, what would you say is the minimum amount of investment? I know it varies on different products, how many styles you have, how many quantities, but you're experienced, how much would you say is a good starting point?
And also, it's also about how much uniqueness you want in terms of your shapes, so your last shapes or your heel shapes, those things as well, they add a lot of money. So as a bare minimum, I mean, we used to say 10,000. I mean, that'll get you somewhere, but thinking about, because you've got to have a website.
Yeah, of course, and that doesn't cover everything around the business. That's literally just stock, isn't it?
Well, to be honest, I always recommend starting small in terms of stock. So I think that 10 to 15,000 should cover your sort of first season's stock, your website, your consultancy fees. You want to work with me, and the other sort of incidental fees, some travel as well.
There's always stuff that comes up along the way, just to have a sort of a buffer, just in case anything goes wrong.
and a bit of training, but you do have to spend it in the right way. I think I've spoken to brands who, one in particular, she got she actually got given a prize, I think, of £10,000.
Wow.
And a couple of years down the line, she's like, I don't really know where it went.
Wow.
Yeah. So actually that amount of money could get you really, really far with your brand, if you're getting the right advice, if you're doing and it's not even thinking about the logical things, it's having someone with some insight who can advise you on the right ways. So it can get you really far, or it can get you almost nowhere.
Yes. So back to the manufacturers and the sourcing process. Obviously that's where Sourcing Playground would come in. We would help manufacturers. In your experience, what are the countries or the places that you've worked with, and the types of manufacturers you've worked with?
So when I work with startups in the UK, they tend to be premium or luxury. That tends to be their kind of business model. Yeah. And so we look at, Italy if it's luxury, or Spain or Portugal if it's premium.
Yes.
It's quite useful, I think, for brands based in the UK to be able to source relatively locally so that they can travel out.
Yeah, it makes it so much easier when you can just, when it's even just a few hours on the plane. A lot of people work with Far East manufacturers, and that's quite difficult. And even
Yes.
the time zones, working with them, emailing, that, it adds time into the process. So yeah.
Exactly. And often their quantities can be higher in the Far East as well. So that means it's more of if you're looking to make larger quantities, then the Far East would make sense. But if you want to start out and you want to be really hands-on, which a lot of people do, then starting closer to home is better. And then when I work with people in the US, we will look at Europe, because I know Europe well and I know the areas of expertise and I have contacts here. But also Mexico and Brazil make some sense as well over there.
And would you say they all have their specialities? What would you say? Obviously you say Italy is from the luxury end, and the Portuguese and Spanish. So what would you say is their differentiation between the three?
Okay, between those three, yeah, it's interesting actually. So Italy has the name, so lots of people think made in Italy automatically means it's
quality.
Yes, and I would say that the very best quality shoes do tend to come from Italy, but they're also capable of making not quite as premium.
Yeah, of course. There's all ends of the spectrum can be found, I guess, but it's just finding the right one.
This is it. And some luxury brands are starting to make the uppers elsewhere, and then the final products are finished in Italy. So things have changed a bit in that respect. And with Spain, the areas around Alicante, so Elda and Elche, are kind of renowned for women's footwear in particular. And actually they do make for some luxury labels as well. They make some really beautiful sort of handcrafted footwear, and I wouldn't say it's less finessed than Italy, but it's more like you can see the work that has gone into it, I think. So that's Spain. And Portugal had been like the slightly more affordable end of premium, but actually they do make some really lovely shoes, and it's quite a mix of different footwear types that they make over there. They make some really good men's footwear as well as women's and sneakers, and yeah, it's quite a blend.
And when you were working with your factories, would you recommend having one manufacturer for the whole brand, or from a risk point of view, would you spread that across different factories, and how would you go about managing the factory element with the products?
It depends on the sorts of products that you're making. If you're making quite diverse product types, for example, if you're making trainers and you're making high heels, and that's all part of your business model, then you're going to need two different factories, because it's pretty rare to find an expert in trainers, who's also an expert in high heels. So I would say differentiate your factories by product type. Yes. To start out, the best way to get a consistent aesthetic is to work with one factory, but of course there is that risk.
It is a risk, anything happens.
But if you're literally just starting out and it is quite small quantity,
you don't really have the choice.
No, this is it.
And you've got two investments on the different molds, the styles, the heel type, and it's just duplicating costs, I guess, at the beginning.
Exactly. So I would say if you are thinking of adding a factory to the mix, then do it with a different product, so a different kit, a different last, different sole, so that you're not actually duplicating at all.
Yeah, of course. So there, obviously, you can, depending on what you're looking for, you can have like completely custom made, which is your own, or how much can you already use a supplier's styles and products and then tweak it yourself? Have you had the experience of doing both?
Yeah, so it really depends on what you're looking for, and I suppose how extreme your designs are, how much innovation, where the innovation is.
Yeah.
Yes, it's much more cost effective to use existing lasts and heels.
And just for anyone that doesn't know, can you explain a last and all the different parts of the shoe, just so we all know what we're talking about?
Okay, sorry. Yes. So the last is basically, it's normally a plastic shape, which is sort of roughly the shape of a foot that the shoe is formed around. So if you had a pointed toe shoe, then the last would be pointed, and the shoe is formed around that. If you had a round toe shoe, it all comes from the last. That's the sort of basic shape.
And it basically helps to give shape to the shoe and make it all consistent, I guess. Exactly.
Yes. Do you want to know lots of different shoe parts?
Just the last, I think, would probably be fine.
Yeah.
Just
Okay.
On board with that. And then so working with your suppliers on the different products, if you want to, for example, like private label or custom manufacturing, what would you say for someone starting out? Let's say they wanted to have slightly different unique elements, but didn't want to create a complete custom shoe from the beginning. How much do they adapt one of a supplier's shoe to fit their design?
Yeah, it's interesting. I think with lasts, attempts to adapt them vary in their success. Generally, if you want a last that is quite different, you need to put down new lasts. So you need to invest in new lasts, and that can be quite expensive.
Roughly how much are we talking?
Depending on where you're sourcing them from and how many sizes you're looking for.
One size, one product, just as a first base.
And also it depends on the amount of pairs that you want to make, because if a factory can work with just one pair of each size, because you're just making really, really small quantities, then you only need to make one size roll of lasts. If you're starting to make quite large quantities, then you need multiples of each size. But a new size run can run into the thousands. And also it depends who's kind of developing the lasts for you, and if you've got somebody in addition to the last manufacturer who is making those specifications, then you need to pay them as well. So it's it can get quite expensive.
And then it comes to the materials and sourcing that. So how far into the process would a buyer get, or does the supplier source all of the materials for you, or would you recommend you yourself, the buyer, doing their own research and sourcing the fabrics and materials? And how does this process go from the construction of the shoe plus sourcing the materials?
So some factories are more geared up to that side of things than others. I would recommend that most people look into it themselves, and the more information that you provide to a factory, the more likely you are to get what you want. Yes. So even if you've sent them a swatch of a leather and they've got something similar from a supplier that they prefer to work with, they'll send you a swatch of what they have, and you can say whether it's right or not. It's good to know what you want. So there's a leather fair which I would recommend everyone goes to anyway if they're a buyer for footwear, or if they're looking to start a shoe brand, and it's called Linea Pelle, and they have a small version in London every season, every 6 months, and they have a massive version in Milan. And also they do a mini one in
show in Milan, looking at lots of different leathers.
It's quite exciting, because they do a really good trend presentation, which I always find quite insightful and looks at bigger picture.
Yeah, of course, and it helps to give you an idea of what other people are doing and what's going to be on trend over the next couple of seasons. It's really inspiring. I've been to a few trade shows when you go and you see all the different products out there, and it really helps the creative juices going, so you get back to the drawing board and put that to new products.
Exactly, yeah, without a doubt.
Yeah. Are there any other trade shows that you would recommend people going to here in the UK, or if there's any else a bit further afield?
So the main ones in the UK are Pure London, and there are several footwear brands there. There are more footwear brands at Moda UK, which is in Birmingham, and they're both every 6 months. And they're definitely worth going to see. When thinking about a little bit further afield, Micam in Milan is an enormous footwear fair. Have you ever been?
No, I've not been to that one.
It's the kind of trade show where you need roller skates.
Oh wow, they're huge. They're just thousands and thousands of suppliers, and it's just you need maps.
Yes, exactly. You need a map. You need a goal. You need a focus. You need to know which halls you want to go to, and which can go by the wayside if you run out of time.
And I think it's really important as well for people to go, because when I've had experience of going to trade shows, you set up meetings beforehand, like do research beforehand and see what suppliers or products or brands are going to be there, and see if you can set up meetings, because they've always got little areas that you can have little meetings and presentations with. And then I find you're a lot more structured in when you go to trade shows, rather than just aimlessly walking around, and you can leave feeling a bit like, oh, did I get enough out of that? Whereas when you go set up meetings and you have a clear goal in what you're doing, then you feel like you've really got out of the whole point of going there, really.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, I would highly recommend that. And some of those meetings can be successful, and some, maybe you decide that the relationship isn't going to work, or they think maybe it's not going to work, but you've learned something from that interaction.
And obviously, you've, rather than going and starting the process with them, you've learned now, rather than waiting a year, 6 months of wasting time with someone or a company that's probably not the best fit for you.
Exactly. Yeah. And there's nothing like face-to-face interaction to sort of start a relationship, especially, I would say, I don't know, I think in mainland Europe, but particularly in Italy, but also Spain and Portugal, it is about relationships. And,
absolutely, definitely.
And yes, it's business, but it's also about coffee.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
You talk about shoes, you have to have coffee with it on the side.
Yeah, you have to have this sort of meeting in the middle. You have to sort of come to an understanding of where each other is coming from, to have that kind of mutual respect that you need to start a working relationship.
And I think as well, it's really nice when when you come and meet another business owner. So if you're a brand, you're really passionate about what you're doing, you're starting a new brand, it's a very creative process, and then you come and meet, a factory owner or a business owner or another brand, and it's really nice when you come together and you're both talking about something you're really passionate about, and you can share that experience with someone else. It's not just, okay, this is about business, we make products for you, and then that's that. It's that, okay, we both really like what we're doing, and it's really nice to have that experience with both of you. So I think relationships are so key to when you're starting a brand.
Absolutely. And that they understand where you're coming from in terms of the purpose of your business. Because I think there are people who start brands and they just want to make pretty things, and they haven't really thought about the context,
and the actual purpose of why they're doing it.
Yeah, but with factory owners, then they do want to know, is this going to be a success? They need to know that you have a really good understanding of who's going to buy it and how much for. And that's what gets them excited, because they think, oh, okay, this could be a really good business.
Yeah, definitely. We explain this. We always advise our buyers as much as possible, go and speak to factory owners and go and do and almost pitch it to them. I think that's the best way of saying it, is that they're investing in you yourself as well as much as you're investing in them as a supplier. It's when you first start that relationship, is it going to do well? And I think suppliers that believe in you and believe in your product and believe in your brand are more likely to invest into the relationship and offer better things at the beginning. So are they able to lower the quantities to help you in your long-term goals?
Yeah.
But if you just go there and expect, okay, I want this, 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 and this, and I want lower quantities, and this is what I want to do, and you haven't really got to understand each other from a business point of view, then they're less likely, I think, is my experience, is to help you in that process. You need to pitch the idea to them and for them to believe in what you're doing.
Yes, you're absolutely right. I think some startups or buyers would go to a factory and just expect them to jump, basically.
Yeah.
Yeah. But they want good business. They don't want any business. They want good business. And so, yeah, it is up to you, as you said, to persuade them, to pitch to them.
Mm-hmm. And I think to look at as supplier, I think it should be as a business partnership. Suppliers are so important to the whole process when you're dealing with a product. You know, if you have a supplier that's not right for you, or isn't great, or it can be bad quality, or is late, you know, there's so many different things that can go wrong, and you really need to know before you start working with them, like, are they the right ones? It's like, I say, it's like dating. You need to make sure that they tick all the boxes and you're happy with them, because it can, for a business that is all product based and that is so heavily dependent on customer satisfaction, product quality, delivery times, and your supplier is like 80% of that and is a result of 80% of that. So I think if you get the right one, then you're halfway there.
Exactly, yes. And you know, these people, you will be working with them, and you will be communicating with them frequently. So it's very important that you do see eye to eye, like any relationship, that it works when you have that mutual understanding. And I would say with clients who are trying to choose between a couple of factories or maybe a couple of agents, and they're like, well, you know, their pricing is about the same, their products look nice, I don't know how to choose. And I'm like, well, who do you like?
Yeah, who do you like? Which one's the best?
Yeah, because the person who is a little bit keener to work with you, then you'll get better communication from them, and you won't feel like you're constantly chasing. Yeah, it makes such a difference.
Yeah, definitely. And I think, you know, from any point of view, and especially from when you're starting a brand, you're a startup, things, as you say, move fast. You need someone that's reactive. You need someone that's responsive, that doesn't wait 48, 72 hours before sending a reply to an email. You want someone that replies to you straight away, is very good at communication, and, you know, wants your brand to be a success as much as you do.
Exactly. Yeah.
So in terms of building that supplier relationship, would you recommend, you know, how often should you visit a factory if it's feasible for you to go and visit, and then other things like having meetings, telephone phone calls, you know, video conferencing, how would you help that relationship go?
In terms of how frequently you would visit them, you know, when there are issues where you're really struggling to communicate, whether it's regarding something visual about the product and you've sent a whole load of drawings and it's just not happening,
it's not understanding,
then that can be an important time. I think at the start of any season where you're handing over your technical drawings and the factory is starting work on the samples, that can be a really useful time. And also, well, in the world of social media now, you need content, and as a brand, whether you're small or more established, great content can come from factory photographs, videos of your actual product being made.
Absolutely.
So
they're like a USP, you know, shout about them. They're fantastic to talk about.
Yes, and it's so nice to see the people, I think, people behind the products that are being made.
Definitely.
So going over with, you know, if you're a talented photographer yourself, like, great, or going over with, sorry, my computer came up with something annoying. Going over with a videographer can be great, and you can get some amazing content, you know, depending on the scale of your business and what you want to get out of it. So potentially at the time where they're manufacturing your bulk production could be a good time as well. And it doesn't have to be that often, but it's important to be able to react fairly quickly and be able to get on a plane and just sort out any issues that arise if you need to. Some things you can have a telephone conversation and it's all ironed out and it's great. But sometimes you do need to be face to face. And yeah, and some people I find respond better to phone calls. They're telephone people,
Yeah.
and some people are email people.
Yeah, definitely.
Mm. And sometimes with language barriers, people can be better verbally rather than in written, or the other way around. So it's sort of figuring out who it is that you're dealing with and what their strengths are and how you're going to get the information you need the best.
And would you say, so walking through the process of, okay, start to finish, how long would you usually, what is the usual time frame for when you're starting working with the supplier and you've got the designs to when you actually get the stock? What sort of time frames are you giving brands, or what would you say is an average time?
Okay, so some of it depends on when you start working with them, at what point in the season you are. Because if you were working to traditional seasons of spring, summer and autumn, winter, sometimes you might need to rush things if you've started developing things a bit late. I mean, how long do you need? 6 months could be quite good.
So if you were giving someone a time frame to work into the normal spring, summer, autumn, winter, when would you say, in your advice, would be the best time for someone to start this process, and when would they launch, giving themselves enough time, because things always go wrong in development, you need a buffer. So what time of the year would you say is best to start?
Okay, so if you were launching in January for a spring, summer season, and you are a brand new startup and you've got quite a lot of development to do, you don't necessarily know quite what you want until you've seen a round of samples and can make some decisions. I would say start development before the factories close in August. So in Europe, most factories will close for most of the month of August. So if you want to launch in spring, then you could start development in June. And that, I would say, is for a first season. I think subsequently, if you know what you want and it's all quite clear and you're communicating well with the factory, you could probably start in September.
So on a good time, you would say it's a 6-month process, but if you're someone that's really from the beginning and needs a lot more time and, is going through the whole process, it would be probably around a year.
Yeah, I mean, I think also it depends on if the brand is just solely focusing on making shoes, or if they've got a day job as well.
Of course.
That is something else, because things can be slowed down on both sides, really. So I suppose 6 to 9 months is probably is about right.
And keep in mind of the spring, summer, autumn, winter, and that August factory close is something to always bear in mind. Different places around the world always have their cut-off point. In the Far East and in China, they have Chinese New Year. Chinese New Year, of course, stops everything for that whole month. So it's things to be mindful of where you're manufacturing in that country. Is make sure you understand their national holidays, when you're not going to have any contact from your supplier. Really do your research and finding out their national holidays in those areas, because it can put a massive disrupt to the whole production process if you're not And I think also as a startup, you should try and work with the factory, or if you're a buyer and you want to make smaller quantities, trying to work with the factory actually to let them manufacture your products in quieter periods is a good idea if you're able to maybe take your stock a bit earlier. So have you had experience doing that? How would you go about discussing that with the factory? I didn't know they did that.
Well, it's interesting. Honestly, trying to kind of get them to fit it into their peak periods where they're making everything for everyone else is pretty difficult. But even big brands will try and balance the production, and they'll think about taking products earlier, or think about fitting different sort of interseasonal products in between, because it benefits the factory to have full capacity all year round.
Yeah, of course. Or then slower periods of the year when they're not doing as much.
So how you go about it is really just talking to them about it and saying, would it help you if I took the stock a little bit earlier? And then actually that helps you because you've got a buffer, so you know that
you won't be late.
Yeah, and if it's your first season, you know, you've got your website waiting for the stock. You know, you've got all these campaigns that you've shot some samples. You know, maybe you've done a Kickstarter, I don't know, but you've got all of these things waiting for your stock.
Yeah.
You don't necessarily want to just expect the factory to deliver bang on time with no issues whatsoever. In some ways it helps to get them a bit earlier. So
definitely, and it also helps for your own sanity as well to know that it's all planned in advance. You're going to have it well advanced, because when things are tight deadlines and you have, as you say, content waiting and marketing waiting for this, then it can get quite stressful towards the launch, and it's something you want to spread the risk out a bit.
And what you don't want to do is have a bite taken out of your first season, as in you're missing a month of sales because you didn't get your stock in time, and then your first season doesn't look good. And so on the back of that,
it works negatively on the next. And,
exactly, and your investors get a bit worried, and it just doesn't look good. So
planning and timing is key with footwear.
Absolutely.
Key takeaway.
Yes.
And then where would you suggest buyers go? Is there any online resources, or is there any place that you would recommend people to go to find out this type of information if they were, you know, starting out? How can they, a lot of people want to do their own research and find things out on their own. Where would you go?
So in terms of online, particularly within the UK, the British Footwear Association, the BFA, is a really good resource. Not only their website, but also getting in touch with them. They can provide a lot of help. You can look at my blog on shoeconsultant.com.
Well, we'll provide a link in the video, so it's easy to access.
Perfect, thank you. And I write articles about all of the things that we've discussed, really, and also on LinkedIn. So if you link in with me, you'll see lots of articles that I share about lots of things that are current, so news features about footwear that are current and really relevant to buyers and also to startups as well. In terms of other online resources, I don't know, there are lots of places in terms of general kind of startup advice, not so much in terms of footwear specifically. But if you've got any questions, just get in touch with me, basically.
What would be, on a final note, what would you say is the one bit of advice you would give anyone starting a shoe brand? What would you say would be the best help that you could give them?
Always start with the end customer in mind. Understand them as deeply as you possibly can. You know, what drives your ideal consumer, what is their disposable income, and what problem are you solving for them?
And when you say about obviously when you understand the customer and then you profile them, what are the key things, what are the things that you should know about your customers, as you say, about like disposable income? But what other things would you start to profile your the target customer?
Well, I have some quite long lists, really, but I suppose the key elements are I suppose their age, the other brands that they buy, not just footwear but also clothing and accessories, so that you understand their aesthetic and what drives them. Think about the sort of income that they would have. That's important. Where do they live? So do they live in a city? Is it somewhere rural? Are you targeting one particular country? Are they male or female? I suppose, what do they like doing, I suppose, because I guess where do they hang out online? So what,
where do they go? What things do they look at?
yeah, and also out and about, and that all affects your product and your that sort of strategy, but also your marketing strategy. How do you then reach these people? Yeah. So that ideal customer profile is going to feed into everything you do with your brand.
You know your customers inside out, basically.
Yes. And also, yeah, I would say to anyone who is in that position, who is a footwear buyer who's looking for some advice, or a footwear brand who's just not quite sure where to go next, how to increase their growth, or if there's a product type that they could be exploring that they're not at the moment, or if someone's looking to start a shoe brand, just get in touch with me and I'd love to help.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much. You've given so many great tips and advice. It's really helpful for all people that started from the beginning. You know, if shoes can be quite a difficult product to get involved with at the beginning. So yes, you've given some fantastic insight. Thanks so much.
Thank you for having me. It's been lovely, Heather.
Well, thanks for everyone for watching the Meet the Buyer sessions.